Hello, I'm Mark Payne. Welcome to History Alive. History Alive is a program of the West Virginia Humanities Council that brings historical figures to life through portrayals by presenters who have conducted thorough research into their character. These presentations are both entertaining and educational. The Humanities Council makes these characters available to nonprofit organizations across West Virginia, such as schools, libraries, historical societies, and a wide range of civic groups. Their presentation fee is paid by the council, and we ask only that their travel costs be covered by the host group. History Live is designed as an interactive experience between the character and the audience. We encourage your organization or school to host a presentation and bring a figure from history for a visit with your audience or students. Having someone like Pearl Buck or Chief Logan come to speak to your group can breathe life into these historical figures and make them more real. Nothing compares to the live, in-person visit. Each presentation consists of 3 parts: a monologue, a question-answer session with the character, and then the presenter breaks character to answer questions about how he or she conducted their research. The presenters on our History Live roster have researched a variety of sources such as diaries, journals, letters, official documents, autobiographies, and the research of other scholars in developing their character. A History Live presentation is not a play. It's very much an audience participation event that relies on interaction between the audience and the character. Being able to ask your own questions of these important figures from the past is a unique experience. It's difficult to reproduce the feel of an actual History Live presentation here in the studio. Without an audience to ask questions, we'll change the format a little bit and have our guests sit with me for a few questions after the monologue. But we hope to give a sample of how a History Live presentation can add to the offerings at your school or organization. There will be information on the screen at the end of this program for how to contact the Humanities Council about bringing a History Live character to your community. At this time, I would like to welcome today's guest from history. We are pleased to have with us in the studio Franco-Iroquoian interpreter, scout, and warrior, Andrew Montour.
Brethren, you have traveled many long and arduous leagues from east across the Blue Ridge. With this string of wampum, I brush the thorns and briars from your legs. Brethren, as you have traveled many long and arduous leagues, with this string of wampum, I anoint your feet. With this string, I wipe the dirt and the mud from your eyes so that you may see the covenant chain of friendship between the 6 nations and my Virginia brothers. With this string of wampum, I wipe the dirt from your ears so that you may hear the words of counsel from the 6 nations and from me. Brethren, I am Setelihu, known to the white man as Andrew Montour. My father, Corondawana, was a great Oneida war chief. He fell in battle many years ago against our traditional enemies in the south, the Catawba. Many times I have gone to war against the Catawba, taken many scalps. But my vengeance has since been glutted. My mother was a French girl captured in New France. She was adopted by the Haudenosaunee, known as the 6 nations of the Iroquois. We are a great people. We are divided in this war with the French, for their war parties are streaming down from the north, from the Great Lakes, with their northern Indian war parties. Odawa, Padawatimi, Fox, Mascoutin, they are our enemies as well as yours. My Virginia brothers, hear now my words as I hold the sacred wampum strings to show you that my words are true. It is so that My blood is French. My grandfather was murdered by the French years ago because he dared to trade with the Anglais. My mother, a grande dame, went to seek peace with the Anglais. She taught me and her children to be the friend of the English and forever be an enemy to the French. It is so. The English have always been good to me. I met the first Moravian missionaries in 1742 when I met Count Zinzendorf along the Susquehanna River. My mother begged that her children be baptized into the waters of Christ. This I was done, and I am a Christian Indian. It is so. I tell you, I have many times put my interest before my English brothers. I have been many times to the Ohio CP with George Grohan, Conrad Weiser, Christopher Gist, Captain William Trent of the Virginia Regiment, because I am well known among the Ohio Indians, especially the Six Nations. We are strong there. We are the overlords in the Ohio country, over the Shawanoe, Delaware. We are over the Wyandot and Hurons, who we have conquered many times in battle. It is so. In 1752, I accompanied George Grohan and Christopher Gist in the Ohio country. We met in council at the Logs Town to make a treaty with the Six Nations so that we may gain for my Virginia brothers all the lands to the east and south of the Ohio CP. This was agreed to, but as I warned our Governor Dinwiddie, the Six Nations, our council fire at Onondaga, did not accept this treaty because the Virginians did not sanctify the treaty with the sacred wampum. It is so, it must be. I know many of you do not understand the language of the wampum, but among us, the people, it is sacred. Nothing is sanctified without the presentation and exchange of the wampum. It is so. Now, as I speak, we know that the French are striking your Virginia settlements along Patterson Creek. They have asked me to come. Our brother, Governor Dinwiddie, who we call a Iroquois, has written me a letter begging me to come to the assistance of my Virginia brothers. Bring as many of my Indian friends as I can so that we may scout and intercept the French war parties as they strike towards Winchester, towards Fort Cumberland. We know that the French are many as there are stars in the sky. We will do what we can to help our Virginia brothers. But you must understand, mes amis, that we too are at war with the French. They too strike our villages along the Mohawk and Hudson rivers. It is a far distance from here, but we will do what we can. Your Colonel Washington of the Virginia Regiment sought my assistance in the Ohio River Valley. He even sent me a commission signed by our brother, Governor Dinwiddie. He sent me this fine gorget and made me a captain of the Virginia Regiment as a chief of scouts. During the Fort Necessity battle, I was there to provide what scouts I could to help Colonel Washington. He was a good man, but he did not know much of the ways of Indian warfare. He would not listen easily to our counsel, and thus he was easily defeated by the French. It was a sad day. during the campaign of General Braddock. He was a difficult man. Braddock, I think, was a good man at heart, but he had contempt for Indians. George Croghan, Christopher Gist, sent for me to explain to the red-coated general why we had trouble bringing Indians into his army. It is because he did not understand the Indian way. He insulted our women and sent their families out of the camp at Fort Cumberland. In anger, the Indians that came with me and Christopher Gist left, and they went over to the French at Fort Duquesne, at the Forks of the Ohio CP. Their war parties are now striking tomahawk and fire to many of your settlements in Virginia. My brethren, understand, this is a war we must win. The French are dogs. It is so. Our brother at Fort Johnson, who we call Wargiagé, you know him as William Johnson, sent me to make you understand that we will do all we can to help our Virginia brothers and our Pennsylvania brothers. But it'll be a long, I'm afraid, a long and bloody war. You must understand that it may take many years to beat the French. But I agreed with our brother Wargiagé during a council to sing my war song so that I may made war parties to strike against the French at Fort Duquesne. This I did. In council, I easily took my tomahawk during the council and became fevered with war. And I said, and I struck the war post with my tomahawk. Instantly, 30 Iroquois warriors, Oneidas, Mohawks, Onondagas, joined me in our war song, and we danced. And we struck the war post many times, and we went to war against the French. We took many scalps, it is so. We took many captives to be brought back to our villages. There, our clan mothers would decide who would be adopted into the nations and those that would be caressed by the fire. It is not the Christian way, but it is the Indian way. I have often spoken against this. Being a Christian, I have always spoken out against the torture and murder of women and children. It is not the ways of the Christ. But among the Indians, it is their way. They do not often accept Christianity readily. But I know where my mother is. Ma mère is in heaven with her beloved Savior. And she taught me everything I know, being raised among the people. You must know, my Virginia brothers, that as Iroquois, as a white man as well, I will do everything in my power to help you. There comes my friend now, Christopher Gist. Brothers, mes amis, hear my words. I must go, you must pardon. I must go and prepare the wampum belts, for we may present them to our brother Governor Dinwiddie tomorrow, So we may present these belts of condolences to wipe the tears of grief from your eyes. because of the many deaths your families have suffered. We will also send the war wampum to many of our villages along the Susquehanna River, so they too may strike their war post and take the war to the French. It is so, eh? It is. And now, brethren, pardon me, and with this string of wampum, I clear the path for you to return to your homes in safety, so that we may meet again soon and parley. I bid you a good day. I am your most humble and obedient servant.
I'm back with Andrew Montour. Captain Montour, I would like to thank you for taking time to be with us here today.
Merci beaucoup.
And you are a captain. You're a Captain Montour. I'd like
Oui.
to ask you, how did you come to be a captain?
I was commissioned by Colonel Washington just before the Fort Necessity campaign. He presented me with a commission signed by Governor Dinwiddie, and to be a captain of scouts for the Virginia Regiment, to scout against the French, who were at that time building Fort Duquesne.
Right. I noticed during your remarks just a moment ago that you place a lot of significance on wampum.
Oui,
And I
oui.
just wanted to ask you, what is wampum and what is the significance of it?
Wampum is made from the shell of freshwater mussel, also from the sea conch shell. It has great sacred significance to many Indian people, not just Iroquois, but Shawanoe, Huron, Delaware. Anything that needs to be, how you say, sanctified, is never considered legal unless the wampum is exchanged and offered. If it is not, it is basically saying you lie.
You mentioned that your mother was French.
Oui,
And
mon mère,
your
le français.
father was Iroquoian?
My father, Corondowana, took the white name of Robert Hunter, to honor his friend who was the royal governor of New York. He was a Oneida chief, great warrior, but he was killed in battle against the Catawba.
You are, so your mother was French,
Oui.
but yet you have sided with the English against the French
Oui.
in the war. What can you tell me about that? Why is that?
It goes back many years. My grandfather was Louis Montour, was a coureur de bois. He was murdered by the French because he dared to trade his furs in Albany and Schenectady to the English and the Dutch. And they warned him to stop. He did not, and they killed him. Because of that, my mother decided to go to the English, and she hated the French. And her children, to this day, we side firmly with our English brothers against les Français. They are our enemies.
So can you tell me some of the ways? I know that you're an interpreter and speak some different languages,
Oui.
and have worked as a mediator, I think, with some of the different tribes. How are some of the ways that you've helped the English in the war against the French?
Well, particularly my influence among the Ohio tribes. I am well known there among the Six Nations, the Haudenosaunee, the Delaware, the Shawanoe, because I know the Indian ways and I know the white ways as well. The Pennsylvania and Virginia governments rely heavily on me to influence them, to get their aid, to get their help in their war against the French, and also to obtain parcels of land for settlement among the Ohio tribes.
Do you find that easy to do? Is that
Oui.
something that
Oui, because even though I am part white, I consider myself Iroquois. Here I am Iroquois.
Have the French ever tried to intimidate you or to threaten you because of some of your activities?
Oui, on 1752, when I was at the Lower Shantytown, we received word that the French at Fort Detroit put a price on my head and sent a war party of Odawa to take my scalp. They did not succeed, eh?
No, I see that they failed.
No Odawa can lift my scalp.
I have to say that you're wearing a very handsome wardrobe.
Merci beaucoup.
What can you tell me? I'm curious as to the metal piece that you have. Does that have any special significance?
Oh, oui. This is a gorget. It is ornamental. It represents a officer of commission in the European armies. It's a great honor. This was presented to me by Colonel Washington, sent by Governor Dinwiddie, our brother at Iroquois. It is a great honor. I am very proud of this gorget.
As well you should be.
Oui.
Now I'd like to introduce you to the presenter of Andrew Montour. This is, in reality, Mr. Bill Hunt of Charleston.
Hello.
And Bill, I want to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to be here.
My pleasure.
I'm going to ask you what I ask everyone that's on this program, which is why your particular character. What was it about Andrew Montour that interested you to the point that you wanted to research him and portray him?
You know, Mark, for many years I was interested in Andrew Montour when I first read about him, and the fact he's such a fascinating and enigmatic person was the fact that he represented both cultures. He did so much for the English cause, and yet in our history books we read very little about him. He's always been somewhat of a shadowy figure, and it was really unfair because without his assistance, basically Virginia and Pennsylvania and upstate New York basically would have been in a lot of trouble because he had such influence among the Indians. Now, although many of them went over to the French, he was influential in keeping many of the Six Nations on the side of the British.
Now, his area or his sphere of influence certainly included what is now West Virginia.
Yes.
And he traveled some in this area, did he not?
He did. He accompanied Captain William Trent in 1753 down the Ohio, and they actually explored parts of West Virginia by going up the Little Kanawha River and back up, hitting the Monongahela and back up into Pennsylvania. He was very well familiar with large parts of the Ohio Valley and parts of West Virginia, including the eastern and northern panhandles.
I know that it can be a challenge sometimes to conduct research on Native American figures, and I'm curious, how did you go about your research? What were some of the sources that you used to put your characterization together?
Interesting enough, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of historical documentation on Andrew Montour. Unfortunately, none of it has survived in the first person. It all survives by secondhand sources of people who knew him or associated with him. There's much information on him in the Library of Congress, the Pennsylvania Gazette, the Williamsburg Gazette, the minutes of the Ohio Company, George Washington papers, Sir William Johnson papers. There is a lot of information out there about what this influential man, but unfortunately, nothing really survives from him. There are 2 letters that have survived that are from Andrew Montour, but they don't believe he wrote them because if you examine both letters, they were written by a different hand. So they believe
he maybe dictated them.
Yeah, he dictated them to a scribe. It's been argued whether or not how educated he was, and personally, I don't believe he was very highly educated. For that reason, he made his mark in the Indian fashion by his mark was a crude Latin cross when he signed a document.
Do we know where he was from, where he was born, or where his early life?
We know that he was born sometime around 1710. He was born among the Six Nations, either among the Seneca or the Oneidas, in a village along the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. How did you
arrive at your costuming? I mean, do we know what Are there any images or illustrations of Montour?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, he was never painted by Romney, or Sir Joshua Reynolds. But I based my historical dress on the writings and memoirs of Count Nicholas Zinzendorf of the Moravian Church. In 1742, he met Montour at a prayer meeting on the Susquehanna River. And he left a very descriptive writing description of Montour. And this is basically the way he was dressed, according to Zinzendorf. He was dressed with a broad band of paint, tattoos. He was mixture of Iroquoian and European dress. So it was an interesting person. The interesting thing about Montour was that Zinzendorf stated specifically that his cast of countenance was decidedly European, and would have taken him to be a European if it hadn't have been for the bear grease and paint and his mixture of Iroquoian dress. So he apparently had inherited much of his French mother's European look.
The paint and markings that you have on your face, do those have any special, or would those be permanent, or like around your eyes and forehead, or was that
Those represent actual Iroquoian tattoos. They would have been permanent.
Okay.
The paint was symbolic. It could be removed with water and could be reapplied.
And he served as an interpreter. Do we know how many different languages he spoke?
We know that he spoke at least 8. Some say maybe as 9 languages he spoke. We know he spoke all the Iroquoian dialects, which is a remarkable achievement. He spoke French fluently. He spoke English. I believe he spoke with some accent. That's why I chose to interpret him with an accent, because when you're so linguistically talented, you're gonna have some type of accent. And he spoke from a very early age these languages. He spoke Shawanese, he spoke Delaware, he spoke Miami, he spoke, we believe it to some extent, he may have even learned some Dutch and German from some of the Dutch and German settlements there in Pennsylvania as well. I don't believe he was very fluent in Dutch and German, but his interaction with Conrad Weiser, who was from Germany, I believe he probably did learn some German phrases.
What happened to Montour?
Interesting point. It's controversial. We know there was 2 dates basically given for his death: 1774, 1772. I believe 1772. There is a letter that was written by Colonel Isaac Hamilton at Fort Duquesne in January 1772. He wrote to Governor Gage, Thomas Gage, the British governor in Boston, that he had received word that Captain Montour, the interpreter, had been murdered on the 20th of January, 1772, by a Seneca who was a house guest, and he was buried near the fort, meaning Fort Duquesne. However, some scholars believe that he was also buried at his home, where present Montoursville, Pennsylvania is today. So we're really not sure, but there's a good possibility he's somewhere where, probably buried under the present city of Pittsburgh.
Well, Bill, I really want to thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And we're glad to have you as one of our newer characters on the History Live roster as Andrew Montour. And I would like to thank all of you folks for tuning in to History Alive.